Picture this. You're a powerful CEO, flying high in your own private jet, surrounded by your team, ready to close a multi-million-dollar deal. But what happens next will blow your mind. A flight attendant slaps you in front of everyone, and that's just the beginning. What follows is a story of power, disrespect, and one woman's decision that changes everything. Stay tuned to find out how a single slap cost an empire. If you're part of the Black Visionaries family, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories like this one. It was a flight like any other, a private jet soaring high above the clouds, carrying a group of top-level executives on their way to an exclusive business meeting. The mood was calm, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh coffee and a sense of luxury. The CEO, a black man in his mid-40s, was sitting in the plush first-class cabin, looking out the window as his mind raced through his business plans. His name was known across the world, a self-made millionaire with a reputation that demanded respect. But little did he know this flight would mark the beginning of the end of his carefully constructed empire. The flight attendants, professional and efficient, moved quietly through the cabin. Among them was a young woman, no older than 25, who had been working in the luxury airline industry for years. She had seen it all: arrogant passengers, rude demands, and countless cases of entitled behavior. But today, something about the CEO struck her wrong. It wasn't his wealth or power. It wasn't even his status. It was something more subtle, a way he spoke to people, a certain dismissiveness in his tone that she had noticed when he first boarded the plane. As the flight progressed, the CEO's demands grew more frequent. He ordered champagne, his voice sharp as he snapped at the flight attendants for what he deemed slow service. His arrogance was palpable. The young flight attendant, though, maintained her professional composure. She had learned to deal with all kinds of passengers, but she wasn't going to let his attitude slide. Still, she remained calm, smiling politely as she poured his drink and answered his questions. But beneath her calm exterior, her blood was boiling. Moments passed, and the tension between the two grew. The CEO, seated comfortably in his first-class suite, had already started making unnecessary comments to the flight attendants. One such comment stood out more than the rest. "Do you even know who I am?" he snapped, his voice dripping with entitlement. "I own this jet." The words seemed to hang in the air. His tone was a mixture of superiority and impatience. The flight attendant, who had heard similar lines from passengers many times before, felt her patience wear thin. She had been in this industry long enough to know that wealth didn't grant anyone the right to be rude. She took a deep breath, smiled politely, and responded. "I understand, sir," she said, "but please know that you'll need to wait for the service as per the timing guidelines." At that moment, something shifted. It wasn't the flight attendant's words, nor her calm demeanor, that had the greatest effect. It was the look on the CEO's face. He didn't like being told no, even in the most polite manner. His gaze darkened, and for a brief second, it felt as though the room had frozen. "I don't care about your guidelines," he muttered, his frustration becoming apparent. "I've got important business to attend to. I paid for this jet. Now, get me my drink. Now." The flight attendant stood still, her heart pounding. She had always been taught to maintain control in these situations, but her patience was being tested. She repeated the company policy, this time with more assertiveness, telling him that she would be with him shortly. But this wasn't enough. The CEO had crossed the line from rude to downright disrespectful. Before she could take another step, the CEO stood up from his seat. His tall figure loomed over the flight attendant as he advanced towards her. The other passengers, who had been minding their own business, looked up, sensing the rising tension. The CEO's voice grew louder, his anger flaring with each passing second. "You don't know who you're dealing with?" he roared. "I can have you fired in an instant." The flight attendant's hands trembled, but she held her ground. The CEO was stepping into her personal space now, making her feel cornered. It was one thing to be disrespected verbally, but it was another to be physically intimidated. She took a deep breath, prepared to de-escalate the situation, but the CEO wasn't backing down. That's when it happened. In an instant, without warning, the CEO raised his hand, slapping the flight attendant hard across her face. The sound of the slap was sharp, echoing across the cabin, cutting through the tension like a knife. The passengers gasped. Some were in shock, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The flight attendant, stunned but not broken, wiped her cheek. Her heart raced, her mind whirled with disbelief, but her body was in autopilot mode. She stepped back, her gaze locked on the CEO. And then, without saying a word, she turned and walked to the back of the plane. Inside her, a storm was brewing. But from the outside, she remained calm, collected. She took a deep breath, grabbed the intercom, and made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you that due to unacceptable behavior, the entire team of executives traveling on this flight, including the CEO, will be removed upon arrival. We will no longer be providing service to them, she said in a voice that held no trace of the fear she felt moments ago. The passengers were in stunned silence. The tension in the air was palpable. No one knew what to say. The moment was surreal. How could one slap, one brief outburst, completely change the course of events? The CEO, who had once been in control of everything, his company, his wealth, his reputation, was now facing the consequences of his actions. As the flight continued, the CEO seethed with rage. His face flushed a deep red as he paced the cabin, his mind racing. How dare she slap him? How could she, a mere flight attendant, challenge him like this? But as he raged, the flight attendant remained composed. She had done what needed to be done. She had stood up for herself, for the dignity of her profession, and for everyone who had ever been treated like they were less than because of their status. She had made a choice, and that choice had cost the CE everything. By the time the jet landed, the CEO was no longer the man in control. His entire team, his colleagues, and his subordinates were being escorted off the jet by security. The man who had once owned this private jet now stood powerless, humiliated in front of his own employees. The world watched as this once great CEO was reduced to nothing more than a footnote in a viral story. The flight attendant, on the other hand, walked off the jet with her head held high. Her calm demeanor had given her the strength to take down an empire. She wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. She was a symbol of dignity, resilience, and respect in a world where power often tramples over others. And in that moment, she had proven that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most weight. News of the incident spread like wildfire across social media. The story was everywhere. Headlines, memes, hashtags, and debates. People couldn't stop talking about the flight attendant's bold move. Was she right to slap the CEO? Was she justified in removing him and his team from the flight? Some hailed her as a hero, while others questioned whether she had overstepped. But one thing was certain, the conversation had shifted.
It wasn't just about wealth or status anymore. It was about respect, power, and how one moment could change everything. The CEO's empire, once thriving on arrogance and entitlement, was now crumbling. His company's stocks plummeted. The public turned against him. Investors withdrew their support.
And the man who had once felt untouchable was now scrambling to save what was left of his career. For the flight attendant, though, this was just the beginning. She had taken a stand in a way that few people ever would. And in doing so, she had shifted the power dynamics of the corporate world forever. And the black CEO, once a symbol of success, was now left to pick up the pieces of his shattered reputation, realizing too late that respect, above all else, was the true measure of power. If you're part of the Black Visionaries family, hit that like button right now and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories like this one. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Stay tuned for more stories of strength, resilience, and power moves that will leave you inspired. And remember, if you ever feel underestimated, always know your voice, your actions can change everything. Until next time, keep striving and keep shining.